Okay, welcome back to the weekly Worm Farm Check-In. My name is Steve Churchill and I'm the owner of the Urban Worm Company. Last week we checked in on the bin and things are going pretty well. I found a few cocoons and I found some juvenile worms, so I know the population's growing. It's important for me to use this really moderate weather here in the Philadelphia area to boost my population to get ready for when we start feeding this bin pumpkin later this fall, which is going to be really fun. Last week we decided to feed the bin a good amount of coffee grounds and filters. Now, here's the thing with coffee grounds. They're not like normal food waste. Fruit and veggie waste holds a surprising amount of water and it releases it over time as it breaks down. Not so much with coffee grounds, which are wet going in, but they dry out a bin quite a bit over time. They just don't release any more water. So we'll be checking in on that. Now this week's gonna be pretty interesting. I've taken a pretty nasty mixture of food waste that had a ton of fruit flies and I stuck it in a Tupperware bin and froze it. And it's kind of a lot of food waste, about 2.2 pounds it looks like. Now freezing does two things. It kills fruit fly eggs and fruit flies, which is gonna be important for us this week. And freezing also freezes the water inside that food waste, which causes it to expand and rupture the cell walls. So once the food waste thaws, this is going to break down much more quickly now that its structure has been damaged by the freezing. Now, our food waste was in pretty bad shape already, so we're going to get quick decomposition no matter what. But what we'll get now is food waste without all those fruit flies and fruit fly eggs in it. So let's open up the bin and take a look at what we did last week and give it a feeding. All right, guys, we're gonna be opening up the worm bin here. Like we always do, we're gonna look at our temperatures. About 68 degrees in the Philadelphia area. It's currently 73 degrees in the barn and about 74 degrees as well in the vermicompost. Pretty much what we'd expect. Go ahead and take this bad boy off here and see what we got. Does not appear to be much going on. There are not a lot of worms near the surface, which is maybe a little bit surprising, but if you remember in the last video, we did a big feeding of coffee grounds. And one of the things about coffee grounds is that when they come out of the pot, they are sterile. Now, these things were sitting outside for a while, so I don't think that they were sterile that long. But, you know, coffee grounds, I like using them mainly because we make a lot of them here. Worms, it seems to take them a while to get to like them. Now, as I dig down here, I'm starting to find some bigger populations of worms here. Let me see if I can grab a good handful and show you. Oh, found a cocoon here. That is always a good sign. We can zoom in on that guy a little bit there. That is a dark one. Looks like it's probably getting ready to hatch here in the next couple days. So I dig around this, I'm trying to find nice dense handfuls of worms, and I know the worms are here. We haven't done anything to kind of do anything toxic for them. I do see a few worms in my hands here. See, it looks like we've got yet another cocoon. If we can focus in on this guy right here, you can see that one. That is pretty cool. Try to get maybe an up close picture here as well. Anyway, so seeing the cocoons is really encouraging, but I'm not seeing the dense worm population, honestly, that I was hoping to find. And one of the things is these worms are kind of spread out quite a bit in this bin. So there's a handful of decent amount of them right here. One of the things you'll notice in a worm bin a lot of times is you're going to have a lot of worms that are in the corners. It's just kind of where it's a little bit wetter. And like I said, I've said this many times, worms love moisture. And so if it's a little more dense in those areas with moisture, it's going to be dense with worms. So again, this would have loved to have been bragging about a bit bigger of a worm population by now. Although this guy is a good sign. That's just a juvenile there that probably hatched within the last couple weeks. Here is another one. So pretty happy about that. But one of the things I'm going to do with this feeding is we're going to give it a dense feeding of pretty rich food waste. And this is food waste that we had collected over the past couple weeks, because in the last video we did the big coffee grounds feeding, which allowed me the time to get a decent amount of food waste built up. And so with this food waste though, there was a ton of fruit flies in there, and we really don't love the idea of importing fruit flies, although for the purposes of this worm bin, I don't mind. But the thing I did was I took this food waste and I put it in this container and I froze it. It was about 2.2 pounds of food waste, so it's a lot of food waste. So we're gonna feed this bin this week with that. We're gonna have to add bedding though. One of the things that food waste does as it breaks down, especially as it freezes and then thaws, and this food waste here is now thawed, is it releases a ton of water, and you're gonna see a really, really watery food waste go in here. It's gonna be a really rich feeding. Now, with all that food waste, we wanna make sure that we're adding a good amount of bedding. This is Pitt Moss. I actually don't think that this is enough. Pitt Moss is that recycled paper product. It's a commercial product made by the company called Pitt Moss. We can put a link to Pitt Moss in the video description below. I'm gonna add a bit more here because this is gonna be a pretty intense feeding. One of the things that my intention with this is to bring a lot of those worms kind of up to the surface. It's gonna be wet up there. We are gonna be absorbing a lot of that wetness with this Pitt Moss though. So we're gonna take this stuff is pretty nasty, smells pretty gross. As you can see, it's very wet. I didn't add any water to this. This is just what happens to food waste when it breaks down. And again, since it's been frozen, it's gonna decompose even faster now that it's thawed. And we also froze it in order to get rid of the fruit flies that were in there. So I wish you could smell this right now because it smells absolutely terrible. This is out in my barn, so I don't care. But if this was in my house, I would not be feeding this. This is gonna be kind of stinky for probably a couple days. I do think that the worms are gonna be moving into this stuff. So this is gonna be really interesting to open this thing up a week from now. I think what I'll do is we'll open it up a week from now, but we're not gonna actually, I don't imagine that we're gonna feed a week from now unless things progress a little faster than what I thought. So that's it, man. We're gonna close this thing up and yeah, see how the worms do with this, and we'll see you next week. All right, guys, all those coffee grounds didn't seem to do too much for us or against us this week, and I didn't love what I saw with the population growth. I was kind of expecting more, to be honest. You know, one of the things a rich feeding can do is get the worms to congregate a bit more in the same place, which should increase the chance of making a love connection. So I gave it a pretty dense feeding of that frozen food waste and a good amount of bedding because that was a lot of moisture that we just added to the bin. Even though the fruit flies were eliminated by our freezing the food waste, I really wouldn't be surprised if they kind of started showing back up again once this stuff starts decomposing and maybe fermenting a little bit, which is what attracts fruit flies in the first place. We'll see about that. All right, so this bin's gonna stink for a few days, but once things get oxygenated a bit, that food waste is gonna mellow out and we'll be back to an earthy smelling worm farm. All right, if you're new to this channel or new to vermicomposting, I wanna send you the worm farm startup guide. It's a cool little PDF that's gonna help you start up a small worm bin like this one to recycle your food scraps. Just click this little link above my left shoulder. It's gonna take you down to the video description where you'll click a little link that you can sign up to get that guide immediately. You can also check the top link in the video description to get that guide. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.